I think one of the only things at this point that's going to get Metatron to actually like really put his beliefs into practice is if he has like a live conversation the way you and I are right now. Because as long as he
Mm.
hides himself behind his scripts and his editing and releasing videos in his own time, he has full control of what he says and how he perceives everyone else. But if he's in a live conversation and he has to address the points as they are brought to him and you're holding him to that point, then he has no choice. And I think that's when the whole facade would crumble. That's my theory. All I can say for myself is, Metatron, you want to have a conversation, we can have it in private. You want a moderator, you want me to pinky swear that I will not insult you directly in that conversation, I'll do it. I have no problem. Because the thing is, like I said earlier, if I'm wrong and you have counter arguments that I should really consider, tell me. Of course, I'm a
Yeah.
leftist and I approach it from a left-wing position, but like I said earlier, if you can prove that my left-wing bias is leading me to make wrong assessments, then sure, I'd like to hear it.
Let me give an introduction quickly about what tonight's going to be about. So, not long ago, I came across the brother Duke It Out, and I told you guys I give him a pass. He's one of us. This individual uh goes by the name of Duke It Out, and he runs a channel. Terry Duke is his main channel. I did say to you last time I cooked Metatron, I said go over to Terry Duke's channel, subscribe to Terry Duke, and subscribe to Duke It Out. But Duke It Out was really my main means of introduction to the individual, the YouTuber known as Terry Duke. Now, Duke It Out has done an amazing series of expose on the individual we know as Metatron, or the entity that we know as Metatron. In his work, he's not just done a drive-by shooting type thing. He's meticulously gone through Metatron's content on and he's dissected his patterns of let's say mendacity. A lot of us has had a sneaking suspicion about Metatron for a long time. A lot of us who've had that sneaking suspicion has been based on our background in Afrocentrism, what for want of a better word anyway. Our background looking into our history and bringing out the lesser known truths about our history, the stuff that Eurocentrist landscape, which is, let's face it, the default landscape when it comes to historicity, um, that sort of landscape would otherwise have washed away. So we come to this from that sort of angle. Duke It Out comes to Metatron from a completely neutral angle. He's just a YouTuber who I think he's into just video games and political essays. Okay. And a long time ago, I think just like me, Duke It Out found some problems with Metatron. I think I'll let him introduce himself actually. I'm going too much into stuff that he will say himself. But I stumbled on his content and I stumbled on it and it was like a light. I've been looking, not looking specifically, but hoping that in time the algorithm would bring me somebody that would really nail what's pernicious about Metatron's so-called historical context, historical content. And I was introduced to Duke It Out, and Duke It Out is the best person at sort of dissecting. In fact, I don't even. I hope, I hope sometime in the future he never decides to turn his ire against on me. Let's just say that. But he's done amazing work on Metatron, and I for that reason alone, I decided to put up his stuff on the channel and do a live and look at dissect Metatron through Duke It Out's work. Now, a few weeks back, Duke It Out saw that live, I think, and he got in touch with me and he said he'd like to come on. Because I reached out to him some time back as well. So he said, yeah, he'd like to come on. And he's been good enough to actually join us tonight. I'm going to introduce him to the rest of you guys. He's a guest. Be nice. Okay. He's of the Caucasian extraction and he is an ally. Thank you very much. He's an ally. He's a Caucasian brother. And so let's all just I want us to kind of listen to his methodology. Just hear this guy out. I find him fascinating. I find his work fascinating. I don't know anything about him. Sorry, I should say I find his work fascinating. I've watched some other stuff on his channel, Duke It Out as well. So I'm gonna add him to the screen, everybody, and yeah, just yeah, I'll do that now. Without further ado, okay, hello, brother. You're live.
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm not bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. So yeah, bro, just kind of introduce yourself, and just tell us how you actually, what's your story, in terms of, yeah, in terms of Metatron. How did you start doing stuff, content on him?
Okay, so, well, hello everybody. Like he just said, I'm Terry Duke. I have my main channel called Terry Duke, which is a gaming channel, but I started a second channel mostly to do politics called Duke It Out. I come at this from the somewhat far left position on the spectrum. And I did do a lot of videos on Metatron. Initially, that wasn't the point. When I started out, I was interested in politics. I watched a lot of political content, and I wanted to do some of my own. And Metatron just seemed like a good place to start because I kind of related to him in the type of content I was making. I was a gaming channel that was about to start going into politics, and regardless of what Metatron, how he would frame his channel, he was a channel talking about history that was also, at least like in the past 2 3 years, like starting to get into like politics. So it seemed that we were both people like out of our respective fields, if it makes any sense, and that made it easier to kind of just bridge into that, if that makes any sense. I do want to say, for the spirit of full transparency, this is something I told you when I commented on the stream you had covering me. I'm not actually that familiar with you or Kuelimika, which I referred in one of my first videos. You use yourself the term Afrocentrist, although you say it's for lack of a better term. I know you guys had your own beef with Metatron, but like I said, even though we start, I think, from the same position that we have criticisms of Metatron, obviously, we do come at it from very different angles, and I don't know that we necessarily agree with each other. This is something we talked about that you said, like, we would probably we kind of agree that, like, if we actually get into like that specific topic, we would probably be talking about that instead of talking about Metatron. So we're probably gonna stick on topic, but I'm happy to talk about other stuff too if you want. Generally, yeah, that's pretty much it. I think I'm gonna wait for a follow up before I keep rambling.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. I think you would find I didn't so I try to keep the conversations organic. I try not to have
Yeah.
much chatter with the person I'm going to be interviewing on the live beforehand, just
Mm-hmm.
because it makes for a better, more interesting live. So I will say about that, here's my full disclosure.
Yeah.
I actually don't think that matters. And I think it doesn't matter because of two reasons. One, um, it's not unexpected, so it doesn't surprise me. Um, and there are reasons why it doesn't surprise me that we come to it from a different that we would potentially disagree. Two, it doesn't matter because I suspect that if you were in the space that I occupy, and if you were coming at Metatron from the research that I've and others such as Quelamika have, you would agree anyway. I have a strong suspicion that you would, because Afrocentrism, again, for want of a better word, or
Mm-hmm.
let's just say Black history, is something that I came at more or less from your perspective. I'm a person who was raised for the my formative years in the United Kingdom, raised a very Western education, studied law at university. Um, I never thought of myself ever becoming somebody that would be particular about looking into Black history. It's So I came at it almost barring the skin difference between myself and yourself. I came to the Black history with as much, or Afrocentrism with as much skepticism as somebody like yourself might have, and it's only through the only thing that would differentiate us is that I have skin in the game, for the pun intended.
Yeah.
I have skin in the game in the sense that it's my history that I feel like has been sort of uh at best suppressed, or and at worst whitewashed completely and denigrated.
For
So
sure.
that makes somebody like coming from my background feel like have that chip on the shoulder to keep digging.
Mm-hmm.
How black was how black was ancient Egypt, how black was some of these times and places that we've been told had nothing to do with black Africans. That's the thing. And when you come at it with that, you you have some kind of gumption that other people don't. Now, I think if you were to, for whatever reason, if you were to, you got lots on your plate, whatever. So, but if you ever did delve into the research that I do on a day-to-day basis, I'm quite confident that you would arrive at many of the same conclusions that I have. Now, I will say, in saying that, that this research can get, or people doing this can get carried away. I will say that right now. I have fights with people from my own quote unquote community quite a lot of the time about, I don't think, about accuracy of some statements that come out of so-called the Afrocentric community.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I understand you in terms of, but I also think, I will say, Mr. Duke, I will say we have also been caricatured to the extent that the average individual, we've been not caricatured isn't the right word, we've been strawman to death, to the point where the average individual coming to study what Afrocentrism is, and Afrocentrism's more serious claims, already has a pre-bias to
Yeah.
thinking, this
Mm-hmm.
is what, and Metatron. So let's actually, to talk of the devil, to actually bring it to what we're here for tonight. Metatron plays on that. Metatron, in his very first sort of salvo, the very first thing that got our eyes turned on him, the likes of Kweli Mika, another channel called The King's Monologue, the very thing that got our eyes turned on him was that sort of straw man game he was playing. When
Mm-hmm.
he approached the topic of ancient Egypt from the start, he approached it not by dealing with this more serious claims made by serious academics within that community. He approached it by going to Twitter and going
Yeah.
to find these. Do you know what I'm saying? I think you touched
Mm-hmm.
on that yourself.
Yeah, I've seen that for myself. And
Yeah.
before we get into Metatron, I'd like to respond to some of the stuff you said. And I think it's actually worth clarifying, because you said, like you have skin in the game, pun intended.
Mm,
And I'll
mm,
follow from the same angle. I don't have skin in the game. Not in the sense that, like, I'm not fighting your fight. I mean that there is an initial reaction, especially on the right, to be resistant to the idea that, like, things may have been different in the past. And what I'm trying to say here is that, like, if you came up to me with, like, evidence that, like, some people were black, or that, like, there was more contribution of black people than originally, like, that doesn't make me feel any way, Like, there's a lot of people who come at this from the position that, like, no, I've been taught it this way, and, it makes me uncomfortable, this idea that, like, there might be more stuff. It might not have been true, If I can use an example of this, for example, something that I've experienced myself a couple of years ago that I remember, because I'm French, right? I'm French-Canadian. My girlfriend speaks English as her first language, and she took French lessons at some point. And one of the things in French, I don't know if you speak much French, but one of the things is that all the nouns, all the words in French are gendered. There's different, some words are masculine, some words are feminine. And she pointed out to me, it seems that, like, sometimes the words that are that are feminine are kind of, negative. Why is the toilet feminine? Why is the house? Why is the kitchen? Why is the oven? It's like, and that kind of put me back. I was like, wait a minute, what are you suggesting? That, like, my language is misogynistic? Like, what the hell are you saying? And it immediately got me in, like, this position where I immediately got, like, this knee-jerk defense reaction where I'm like, I don't want to, get into that. And I kind of understood it afterwards. It's like, it's okay for things. And the thing is, I looked it up afterwards, and there's actually been academic discussion on that very topic. So, that's what I mean. So, like, the thing is, I start from an example that the position, like, I didn't really see any compelling evidence, for example, that Cleopatra could be black. But if she was, I don't care. Like, I don't need her to be white. Just like I don't need the Moors to be white. I don't need Europe at one point in time to be completely white. That really does nothing to me. I think the main issue is that, like, the way I approach, for example, Metatron's content, to bring it back again, is that obviously Metatron, like, I think, like, even though I'm not educated, we could get into that later, but his methodology is obviously wrong, and he's coming at it from from a narrative, you know? And all I'm saying is that if I'm gonna turn around and say, like, listen, I'm not educated enough to talk about the history, but here's a group, here's someone that does talk about the history, I want to make sure at least that if that person I'm citing, you know, doesn't have like a narrative of their own, even if the premise for that narrative is something I would generally agree more with, if there's a narrative behind it that I'm not fully sure about, if there's the way that evidence is presented, like you see what I mean, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Go on.
Okay, so that's literally just it. Like if I'm citing someone else, I want to make sure at least that like the person I'm citing is someone that I'm at least familiar with. In the context of Kulimika, when I cited him, I did find his video very interesting, but I didn't check any of his content. I don't know the rest of the community, and this is why I also said in the comment, like, I wasn't comfortable with this audience coming onto my channel and rehashing those arguments, because those weren't the arguments that I was making. So I don't want, if I'm not aware of them, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's really just it. So, you know, I'd be happy to talk
That,
about it more. The final thing I'll say is that I do understand and sympathize and want to be careful about simply labeling the interest in African history and the contribution of black people as Afrocentrism. Someone actually told me that on my comment, you know, like it's kind of, you know, unfair that like, oh, this black person is talking about black history, he must be an Afrocentrist. Like, I understand there's also that line as well. So I understand we use the term for lack of a better one, but I also understand how it can be used negatively. And, you know, I don't want to do that, you know.
thank you. Chat. See, this is what I'm saying. This is these are the signs that you look for. And this is a very good sign. This is a sign of an honest individual. Now, I know seriously, I mean that because that's exactly how I approached it coming into this to begin with. I approached it sort of I went to I obviously I've been educated in the default mainstream history quote unquote Eurocentrist anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually, before I even started the channel, I read widely enough to see what does this side say and what does this side say and what do people in the middle say, or what do people who don't have any skin in the game say. And then I put it all together and I looked on a balance of probability, what do I favor, what do I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly do that as well. I do excuse me, I probably lose more time than other content creators who do what I do. I probably lose more time researching the other side, you know, more than I do most other content creators, because I make sure when preparing my videos. I did a video on the Kushite Empire and the 25th dynasty Kushite Empire of Egypt, and I ended up reading books that I didn't have to read if I look back now. Books just because I wanted to make sure that I covered all bases in terms of, I know there's an argument out there that claims that, as wild as that as it may sound to some of us, that even Kush wasn't we can't really lay claim to that civilization. So
Mm-hmm.
I made sure I read books that would rub me up the wrong way just to see what they were saying. Even if I knew that I had a pre-bias towards it, I made sure at least I'm adept at with their arguments. I'm at what's the word I'm looking for? Acquainted with their arguments.
Yeah,
So I
you've
think
become
I like
familiar. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I like exactly what you're saying, and that sounds, again, it seems to me like an honest person. The approach an honest individual will take towards this kind of stuff. I just want to read this out from Sir Factant. He says, "Hey brother Duke, thank you for your work. We agree more than we disagree." Thank you for that
I hope
$5
so.
super chat.
Thank you.
um but and then he's also says this. He says, although the world is mostly black slash brown, the West goes out of its way to suppress the achievements of black brown people. This is what we highlight. I agree with that. I agree with that. Thank you for that
Yeah,
$5 super
and
chat.
on that specific note, like the suppression, like we're talking about like the whitewashing, the Eurocentric nature of education in the West. And what I will say is, you know, I haven't like had like a personal interest in like African history, but I do find something very interesting about looking at the diversity of the past. I mean, like today, like a lot of people think today, like okay, well, like globalization, like how easy it is to travel. That like now we're diverse, but like if you go back 500 years, like the blacks are over there, the whites are over there, the Asians are over there, and it's like I think it's very interesting to see like how these people actually connected with each other and saw each other, and I think that part I actually find very interesting. Like when I heard, for example, that the Vikings fought with the Moors in Iberia, that's awesome. Like I'd like to see like the Vikings, like if they had a show from their perspective, or if there was a show on the Moors to see that perspective. I think that's interesting to learn, you know. And
I had I had an individual come on the channel a few almost a month and a half ago now, and he quoted to me. He said, he's an actual professor, and he said doing his research to find that there was almost 10% of the population, about 6 to 7% of the population of certain boroughs in England, were black, were Moorish in the Renaissance period. Now I went and looked up. I said, "Wow!" I raised my eyebrows at the time, but I really didn't take that in. I went and looked that up, and I looked comparatively. There's a borough here in England. It's a borough of London. It's a small enclave of London. It's called Brixton.
mm-hmm,
Brixton today has 10%. Brixton is known, if you were to say to people in the UK, name a predominantly black area. Now Brixton would come up easily. Brixton has about, I looked it up, 10% of the population is black. Now that's not a lot, but it's because it's a white dominated nation, it's a lot within that context. So when you
mm-hmm,
go to Brixton, it's typically Jamaicans, Afro Caribbeans. And now to be told that in the 1500s, in the late 1500s, there was a bar, and this is a time with very, very poor records.
yeah,
So you can bet that there were more people that were of Moorish or black descent living in London in that time. For to be told that a borough was 7% black in parts of London, and there were others that were around the same, you start to think to yourself, why don't we know that? Why don't we actually know that, oh, these some of these places. So that's what I mean by when I say we've been straw men to death. They've straw manned us to death before the conversation even gets started within the
yeah,
wider public,
mm-hmm,
because people think people will think, oh, if you just said that off the top of your just off the top of your head without even referencing the professor, people just think, what are you talking about? That's obviously a lie. It wasn't like that. But anyway, that's going off on another tangent. It's
yeah,
just to back up what you were saying there.
yeah,
All right, what we're gonna do tonight, family, that's a good enough introduction. We're almost half an hour into this conversation.
mm-hmm,
Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna anchor this based on Duke It Out's video, where he kind of goes into he analyzes, and he has lots of videos like this, and he analyzes another content creator, and he analyzes this. In this instance, it's Metatron, and he analyzes response to something that, if you guys, for those of you who are in the States, you know a lot about it. The controversy that's been going on with the state of Florida banning books wholesale, and forcing certain things to be taught in a certain way, particularly around Black history. And he analyzed Metatron's take on it. Okay, this isn't that old. This story, this is still going on, as far as I know, in America currently. It's
Well,
just of
to excuse me, to clarify on this one thing, when I covered it, it was already like a little while ago, and that video is about a year old. So now we're talking that specific issue. I'd say it's about 2 years old now. Yeah, I think it's still relevant to the
right.
content of Metatron, because the fact that he still hasn't responded to it, like that's still a big issue. But I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Go ahead.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, without further ado, I'm just gonna play that video. The only people that have that can stop it are myself and you, Duke It Out, but I'll refrain from doing that, so that really, in effect, you have full, more or less full authority over when I pause the video, and then I pause it, and you can comment over it just to clarify certain things.
Well,
And then if there's enough.
do feel free to stop it yourself. I mean, we're there to watch it together, so I think we should both have that that autonomy.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so here I'm just gonna chat. I'm just gonna present it.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Do Get Out. Today we have yet another sequel in the Metatron saga. So to recap, the criticism, that is, of Metatron purposefully not attacking the right, was something I talked about in my second essay on him, where I responded to one of his videos talking about historical revisionism in the modern day. This video was where Metatron compiled his rhetoric on diversity in historical movies, and took it even further. It was no longer merely inaccurate to portray historical characters with different ethnicities. The premise of this video was that there is an agenda to systematically attack the historical truth, both in the media and in academia.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that, like, of all the things that I think Metatron has ever said, this is probably one of the most, like, conspiratorial nonsense I've ever heard. I did talk about it, like, in the video, because I'm recapping it, but, yeah, this whole thing that, like, corporations that only care about, you know, their bottom line and, you know, doing their occasional tokenism, that this is, like, an active agenda to blackwash, like, everything as if they're Afrocentrists. Like, come on. Like, I haven't really heard you talk about that much when you did the live stream on my content, but I'm guessing we're in agreement on that one. It's
First of all, I think he's overplaying the thing, the whole controversy, the conspiracy.
yeah.
I think if there is a conspiracy, and it's a big if, I think what Hollywood is doing is chaos making. I think Hollywood has had years and decades, and if Hollywood now wants to start to, I agree with him insofar as if Hollywood was serious about telling black stories, it would have been doing that. It
Yeah,
would have
absolutely,
been doing that
exactly.
and do it in a very. But I think for whatever reason, and this is where I get conspiratorial, I think Hollywood is more interested in creating chaos or discussion. We'll say discussion, and I don't. That's how I see it. Now, for someone like Metatron, instead of seeing that, I think it's very easy for someone like Metatron to go and think, okay, this is going on, but is it really black led? And is it to
Yeah.
try and whitewash? Is it to try and blackwash? It's very easy for him to just take a breath back and think, is it really to blackwash, or is there something else going on? But he won't do that because
Mm-hmm.
he couches himself as an intellectual, and I think as an intellectual, you have to think deeper than Metatron than Metatron often, thinks.
Yeah.
And I think thinking deeper, I just think Hollywood is trolling us. I think Hollywood is on a big troll. Maybe it makes more money. Maybe it's the same. It's the thing of bad publicity is good publicity too. No publicity is bad publicity, but some publicity is good
Yeah.
publicity. I don't. Maybe it's that. So that's my take on that.
Okay.
But yes. Do Marielle says they don't want to uplift you. I'm going to put that up. Do Marielle is on point. They don't want to uplift people. I think they want to keep people arguing. I don't know, for whatever reason. Maybe it's a money thing. Maybe that sells. Maybe that sells more.
I think
Um,
that's the point. Yeah, it's yeah. Your idea of, like, you saying, like, they're trying to create chaos. Are you familiar with the YouTuber H Bomber guy?
no, I'm not.
No, he's a great essayist, but years ago he made a video on, like, woke brands, and basically the idea that, like, there was this one coffee machine company that, like, decided to, like, you know, take a political stance, and it led to, like, massive boycotts. But the massive boycotts also gave them millions of dollars worth of publicity, and it inspired. I
Right.
don't know if you're familiar. Like, there was this. I think it's this football player with the big afro who did a publicity for Nike,
Colin
and
Kaepernick.
that might be him, yeah. And he did that big publicity for Nike, and the point is, Nike, like, noticed that if you have this shock, if you have this controversy, it drives up exposure, and so the woke is really like its own form of rage bait that drives engagement. So there's
Wow.
definitely that angle that H Bomber Guy approached specifically from you know, advertising. But I could definitely see the same thing happening more or less in movies. Like, they make another character, a pre-existing character, black. They get to say to collect their brownie points, so to speak. But at the same time, all the entire woke are talking about it, makes a lot more publicity. It's free, you know. So
Mm,
I
mm,
definitely
mm.
think there's a lot of sense to what you're saying. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't mean to, like, completely spiral into this whole other thing, because I know the
No,
video's
that's
about
fine.
these
That's
things.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Let's have fun. There's no bounds to anything. So let's
All
just
right.
let's just do whatever.
Yeah, let's go. You see, if Metatron claims not to be political, but only to fight for the historical truth, and does so from the position that history itself is under systemic attack, then it's really strange that he almost exclusively only fights against diverse castings at private productions, old BBC cartoons, and obscure websites that nobody really knows about. Yeah, no, the point about the BBC cartoon, this is another example of what I was talking about earlier with, learning about how the ancient world, in spite of not having the globalization we have today, was still diverse in many different ways. It was actually one of the first things that got Metatron into this reactionary content. It was the BBC cartoon showing a black centurion in London, as a province under Rome. And I do remember that at the time there were teachers in England actually came up publicly and said, actually, the black centurion is fairly accurate. We have records of Ethiopian soldiers at the Adrian Wall. We know for a fact that they would have foreign legions doing the occupation, because if you have like the local soldiers watching the local population, it's bound to be a problem. So given the fact that the Roman Empire was actually very large, it was normal to see a diversity in their soldiers like spread all across the empire. And that's something that I find interesting to learn about, in spite of him losing his mind as this one children's cartoon. Like, get over it, dude.
I mean, and you know what? That things like that is what things like that are what gives away the fact that you're dealing with a pseudo intellectual. I wanted to name this subtitle it requiem the word's gone, requiem for a pseudo, because really he's a pseudo intellectual, because if it only takes you a cursory sort of research into these times and places for you to see that actually it's more diverse than you might have expected. You had Rome, like you just said, Rome was literally drew its empire, drew its army from all over its empire. So why wouldn't there be black soldiers
Yeah,
in
like,
England at the time? It's not like yeah, incredible.
mm-hmm.
But I've not even actually watched that video. I think I've seen it, but I never clicked on it. But
Yeah.
um yeah, it's the kind of thing, and again, it's the kind of thing that I think he knows draws his core audience. Yeah, you did a live that I commented on. Sorry, you produced a video that I commented on in my live, my last live on this,
Mm-hmm.
and you spoke on that point. You were one of the few people to actually go through his videos, a pattern I'd noticed as well, where you actually went through his videos and you showed comparisons as to which videos actually drove
Mm-hmm.
his viewer count
Yeah.
up, and it was clear as day. Anyway, yeah, I'm just gonna click play again.
Yeah, for sure. Don't get me wrong, while it is absolutely possible for casual viewers to watch something covering a topic they know little about and coming out believing misconceptions, what Metatron always leaves out of the conversation is the fact that movies, shows, and private documentaries are not part of actual academia. Netflix producing a documentary made with an Afrocentrist producer is not going to single-handedly override all the academia and science that went into studying Cleopatra, and it's certainly not affecting curriculums from public education anywhere in the world. In reality, if a society is going to be brainwashed into remembering history differently, it's going to have to come from a central authority with enough power to ensure a narrative is uniformly applied to all members of a community. In that sense, it's not going to come from a decentralized, privatized media industry doing the occasional tokenism. It's going to come from state propaganda, which can take many forms, but in the context of teaching a historical narrative to an entire population, then it's going to come from public education, and the government dictating what is to be taught to all students in that country. And in my previous video, I brought up a couple of examples of this just from the United States, where right-wing politicians have actively been banning books and forcing schools to change their curriculums. From there, I argued that if Metatron genuinely wants to fight for the historical truth, then those are the instances that he should be covering on his channel. And then I went on a bit of a leap where I accused Metatron of not talking about those things on purpose. Not because it's too political, mind you. Metatron can begin every video saying that he's not being political all he wants, but the very premise of fighting for the truth against the perceived adversary that is trying to change history to fit their narrative, that is by design being political. And he's done it multiple times already, just not with the examples that really matter.
Okay, here's where I pause it, chap. Right, gang. What what the brother Duke It Out said there is very, very important, and I hope you caught it. You can say all you want, as we're about to see. Metatron plays this game all the time, and it's a very convenient game. he says, and it's something he says before he's about to pander to his audience. He says, "I'm not. This isn't a political channel. I'm not a political channel.
Mhm.
This is a purely history." First of all, that premise alone gives off snake oil salesman, because history, the study of history, anyone who's looked at history, is political. The study of history in itself is very, very, very much to its core, at its core, a political thing. That's why we have, like, Duke It Out did a video about revisionist history, and he gave the proper definition. Well, he gave the proper definition for revisionist history, and then he gave a more recent kind of bastardization of that
Mhm.
term. And it's something that historians have always had to grapple with: how much of what we know now for fact is down to, or how much of what we thought we knew is down to political narratives getting involved, and things not politically convenient to admit in history, Holocaust and things like that. So even just as a history channel alone, you're already kind of going to be political. But let's take that away. Metatron is purely political. You can watch his content now. I mean, from what I came across him, because I kind of, every now and then, I liked his take on it, on swords years and years back, when I had my hair. I used to watch his things, and
Me
I used
too,
to think,
brother.
I say, oh, this guy, this guy's pretty cool. I like his take on this sword. But you can definitely see that as the years went by, he became political, because he started talking on very political things. Now, for you to say, when it suits you, that, oh, I'm not a political channel, I'm just purely historical, that's very, very, very shady. So I just wanted you guys to note that, because the video might be going too fast, but that's a very, very crucial point, because you're going to see why. Well, you're going to see why that's crucial going forward. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Duke It
Yeah,
Out.
absolutely. The one thing I will say is that I do feel like, since I don't want to say like correlation equals causation, but I do know that he's seen that video because he's commented on it. I feel like a lot of that apolitical facade has actually faded away in the past year. Like, now he's not even trying. Like, he's gonna talk about Asmongold, even though like his channel is. He always said, and this is something I think I bring up in that video, like he says, well, if I talk about politics, it's only if there's like a tie with history. There's no tie anymore. He's just saying stuff. Like, and it's the fact that he's saying stuff, but he doesn't want to own up to it either. Like, he never brings what he says to its logical conclusion. And, coming about like the whole part with like the pseudo history, I think the first red flag for that is the narrativization. I think I'm saying it right. It's really the fact that he says, it's not just I'm talking about history, it's the history that I'm talking about is under attack, so I am fighting for the historical truth, That's the political angle where it gets there, because then you're making opponents that you're fighting against. And it's like, if you're just talking about history, you'd just be like Scalagram right now. Scalagram's not talking about politics, and he's on topic. You're not. Like, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
What I argued was the real reason for him not talking about those instances is because he's a right-wing grifter. It's because he knows he appeals to the right, and he knows that going from attacking woke Netflix to attacking the American right in such a direct manner would not go well with the right-wing viewers that now makes up the bulk of his audience. I said the accusation was a leap because Metatron purposefully not covering these things is not something I could prove at the time. Although, as mentioned in my previous video, a viewer of his had called him out on the hypocrisy and cited several examples, and Metatron had responded saying that those examples were too political and therefore beyond the scope of his channel. However, he still made a video on politics ruining children's education, and instead of bringing up those examples, he chose to still focus on the BBC cartoon from 7 years ago. So it's funny how that works.
Sorry, I've gone back a bit, but I'll seek and find the right place.
Yeah,
But
well,
go on.
no, it's the part where like he was complaining about how the black characters in that cartoon, like they're okay, and like the slaves are white, and like I said, I'm not fully familiar with that history. I just want to say, like, it would make sense that a Roman citizen, a foreign, Roman citizen who is black, who has his own family, would have local slaves in Britain. You're not actually importing your slaves when you can just snatch them across the street. You would have a foreign occupation, but I don't see bringing all your slaves from Ethiopia either. You know what I mean? Like, to me it makes sense that it's depicted like that, even if the cartoon itself might be trying to have like some kind of subliminal symbolism here where it's like we can't show black people in chains or whatever, but like for me, even historically as they presented, it makes sense.
Brilliant analysis there. And I want to say to you, in addition to that, that I never even thought of that angle. I never thought of that angle in relation to this. But that's the kind of thinking that goes out the window when you're just knee jerk, when you just, like you said, grifting. You know, you
Yeah.
don't you just want to produce, oh look, they've blackwashed, all the white people are slaves, blah blah blah. But I mean, if that was the rationale behind that for the BBC doing that in the cartoon, how awkward would it be? Do they have to explain that in some kind of blurb before they start
Yeah,
the
like
presentation? Of course not. They're hoping that people aren't knee jerky and they actually think about the situation, um, just like, unbiased, just rather than just, what does that mean? And I give you another example about this. There's another individual. I'm not going to name him because I don't want to give him eyes, but he did a expose. He debunked Afrocentrists a while back, and his debunking was based on this idea that Bangle Lady, Ivory Bangle Lady, who's this one of the oldest skeletal finds from the Roman era in Britain. She came along with, she was one of the earliest Roman settlers in Britain, and the study showed that she was African descent, North African, but African descent. And the portrayals of her, the reconstructions of her, gave her a black African phenotype. And this guy did a video debunking the idea that North Africans were black, except he hadn't. Now, I actually know for a fact that he was being disingenuous there. It's not that he didn't know. But if you go looking properly at the study on which that reconstruction was based, the study actually goes on to show that her bone structure, her bone formation, her craniometrics, and her skeletal kind of profile closely aligned, not with modern day North Africans, but with what we would class sub-Saharan Africans. So there was real science that had gone to reconstructing this lady. So it wasn't just that somebody was being Afrocentrist about it. It was literally that, and I think it's still, unless it's been scrubbed, it's on the Wikipedia page. But again, all of that kind of goes out the window if you're just knee-jerking and you want to create a certain kind of content for your viewers. Sorry that was a little sort of
yeah, but to bring it back to that, there's someone who just said that, and I think it's really funny. There's RJ McKenzie in your chat that said Metatron thinks black equals slave, and I just think that's really funny because the thing is, like, okay, if the black character was a slave, that's not political, that's perfectly fine. But now you got a white slave. Hold on now that's a problem. Like,
chat. You see why I had this man on? You see why I had this man? Press one.
no, but
Press
like,
one.
it's true. Like, to be honest, I had not thought about that either. Like, I was looking at it like on its own historical merits. And granted, I'm not a historian, but I just think it's like, yeah, it's like, oh my god, the black person is a citizen and the white person is a slave. My god, like.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna hit play again.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, a couple of months later, I made another video on Metatron, this time much shorter, only making fun of a video he made in which he was pretty lazy overall, but I guess it was enough provocations for Metatron to finally respond. And that brings us to the present. As of recording this is my only direct interaction with Metatron. I want to go over the entire comment, but I'll focus instead on the part that addresses what I was just talking about, ignoring historical negationism coming from the right. Once again, Metatron insists he didn't know of those instances, but also argued, again, that it's too political, except for one. The one example being about the new Florida teaching standards that said black people benefited from slavery. To this, Metatron says that he would consider making a video on it due to my suggestion, and lo and behold, here we are. Before we start though, can we talk about the thumbnail? You're talking about American slavery, but the hands and shackles are white. And the ship on the other side isn't even a slave ship, it's just a modern rusty ship.
I noticed
just on the tip of, this is not political. I am not making it political, therefore my hands and shackles are white. I have no proof of that. I'm purely speculating right now. I just think it's funny to think of it that way, you know.
Oh my goodness. I guys, I think I've met I think I've met my brother from another mother. This guy, exactly my thought, exactly my thoughts. I thought that would be that would be exactly what he would say to that. That's exactly what I can see. Having followed the pattern of his deflections, that's exactly what I think
Well,
his excuse would be.
the whole point he's making there is because he's gonna try and take the video, like the topic, away from what's going on in Florida to just talk about slavery as a whole. You're talking about American slavery, and your hands are white. Like, what are you doing, man? I pointed out an example of the right trying to change history. Metatron took on the suggestions, so here we are. Before we get into it though, let me bring a bit of context. About a year ago in Florida, the Board of Education released a new history teaching standard for public schools. Teaching standards, according to Project 10, are a set of objectives that describe what students are expected to know and be able to achieve at each grade level. So while these documents are not school textbooks per se, once they're established, teachers are expected, to the best of their capabilities, to transfer the same talking points onto the students. This is pretty standard procedure, however, this particular history teaching standard that was released last year contains some questionable language. Namely, the guide implied that black people benefited from slavery through the skills they learned while enslaved. It also implied in a different section that black people also committed violence during race massacres. Now, these are two small sections from a document of 216 pages, for which nothing else had any significant backlash that I know of. So while it seems small, it's also important to take this document in the context that it was released. For starters, this guide came after a law called the Stop Woke Act was passed by far-right Governor of Florida Ron DeSantis, which essentially forced schools all across the state to ban all kinds of books as well as restricting teachings of anything that's considered woke indoctrination, by which it really means anything in the curriculum that conservatives don't like, including parts of history. In case it wasn't clear, this law effectively censored free speech. But this law also resulted in the administration blocking a new advanced placement course on African American studies just a few months before this new guide was released, which wasn't allowed into schools until it significantly drew back a lot of its content, including the removal of several key black authors. So the point here is that after spending a couple of years fighting against schools and the woke moral panic, these choice of words were reasonably seen as just another step by the right-wing Republican administration to limit what can be taught in Florida schools, as well as trying to find a silver lining in something like slavery. So after years of covering meaningless woke tokenism and avoiding anything else presumably deemed too political, Metatron is finally here, about to talk about an actual example of politicians using the power of the state to enforce a narrative on American history, which I would argue is the real danger to the historical truth. So how is that gonna go? Is Metatron going to hold no punches, tell it like it is, whether this attack on history comes from the right or the left? And will he hold the line against the critics, like on those t-shirts he sells? Or is he, I don't know, going to strip the topic of all its political context, give the right as much benefit of the doubt as he possibly can, somehow find a way to make it about the left, and pretend like it's not political at all? Yeah, I feel like this is as good a point as any to talk about like the actual, like, curriculum thing and, like how it's being perceived. Like, I just want to say, because like I was looking for this comment under my video because like it's literally like not self-aware, but it's exactly what it is. Someone, because I was talking about that, and someone in the video, like literally just the first sentence. Okay, but you're missing the whole idea of this. The idea is to teach both the bad and good of the slave trade. I mean, that's literally it. Why would you suggest that there was a benefit? I go into it in the video, but like, even if like, okay, like they learned, trades, they learned skills or whatever. Okay, like, this in of itself, like, I don't care. Like, it seems, like, if you didn't know how to pick cotton, now you know how to pick cotton. Like, congratulations. It's not a good thing, If you end up being freed and then you're now picking cotton for a wage, that's not to your benefit. You're just making the best with the situation that you still had no control over. You're still in a country that you didn't pick. You're still been robbed from your home. You still don't have rights. You're still at risk of persecution. So I wouldn't really call just doing the job that you've learned to do a benefit. Like, it's just so bad. And this person saying, yeah, the whole point is to teach the good. Well, thank you for making my point for me, idiot. Like, and I want to bring it back to, like, that thumbnail you made, because aside from the MAGA hat that looks really funny, like, twist on his head, he looks really goofy, I would not go as far without, like, seeing it, like, without seeing Metatron go full mask off, I wouldn't go as far as to say that, like, he would support the Confederacy. But the point is, if you're not even going to call it out, you're just going to be like, oh, I'm not political, so I'm not going to make a judgment on this specific curriculum, then you might as well be supporting the Confederacy, because they would be there and you'd be like, well, I'm not political, so I'm not going to criticize them. Like, I feel it's inflammatory, but in a way that's like kind of brings the point that, like, if you're not denouncing it, you might as well be in support. Like,
now I have good reason. It's a parody. It's just a parody for putting the Confederacy behind him. I'm just parodying him. So I think he's done well ignoring my channel for however long. So I wouldn't be surprised if on this occasion, because he likes to do that, he likes to pretend he doesn't see things until he has the upper hand. So I said that in my last live on this, he actually brought up the fact that somebody who knew nothing about the situation his late mother was in with cancer, he brought that up as a weapon to wield against them, because they made a passing joke about, just a juvenile joke about, Metatron's mama does his homework for him. This is a childish thing. And he wielded that in a debate that was supposed to be academic and whatnot. So I wouldn't be surprised if he finally decides to respond to me. And not that I've sought him out. I don't care for whether he knows about me or whatever. In fact, I'd much rather he just leaves me alone. But I wouldn't be surprised if he sees that thumbnail and he goes, oh, he starts to clutch his pearls and whatnot. But yeah, I did that for parody. I just did that for parody.
Of course, yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'll help it. I have a lot to say on what you just said there about the whole slavery thing being a benefit. I think. But I'm gonna let the video play, because you make the point also in the video as well. But yeah, here goes.
Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today's topic is kind of a stronger, a little bit heavy topic, if you will, because we're going to talk about slavery in history. The inspiration for this topic actually came from a whole situation that occurred in 2023, which is of course has to do with politics. Now, as you know, I don't discuss politics, even less so American politics, since I'm not American, but it seems like that there is a whole situation when you go Google the idea of slavery, particularly in connection with Florida, and new standards to teach, that has created backlash.
Okay, so I already said it, but I'll say it again now, because he's just being misleading. The inspiration for this video came from me and some of his viewers. He didn't get the idea from reading about it, he wasn't just casually googling. He heard about it from my videos and told me directly that he might make this video due to my suggestion. As to why he didn't want to bring me up, my guess is he doesn't want to risk sending people my way in case I tell them, for example, how he clearly did not watch The Woman King before making his video on it, or how he was never censored by YouTube but let people believe it so he'd get more financial support on Patreon, or how some of his videos are clearly lazy and full of lies. Although, I suppose another reason could be that he just wants to stay on topic and bringing me up doesn't advance the video. But what do I know? Could be either.
I know for a fact, before you say what you're going to say, I know for a fact, as much as a person can know for a fact without actually having documentary evidence or seeing into someone's mind, I know for a fact that that's what Metatron's doing there. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, what I want to say is, I'm on your stream, so I'm taking this opportunity to say it because I didn't get to point it out to anybody, and it's good because we got an audience here. One of the things that happened from this thing that I said, like, like he didn't just like randomly find it, he got the inspiration from me, and he's now being misleading. When he commented under my video, like anybody can go under that video and see the comment for themselves, I pinned it, I think. But the first thing he says is, the reason I did not bring you up is because I don't want to like my audience to go gang up on your channel, which on itself, like, fine, I don't care. The thing is, I accused him of lying afterwards about something else, and he said like, oh, I never lie on a video, and it's like, you just admitted to me in your first comment that you lied about where you got the idea. Like, even if it's a white lie because you didn't want to like send your audience to gang up on me or whatever, you could have just said that. I got the idea from someone, but like, I don't want to mention who or whatever. Like, you're literally saying, yeah, the reason I lied is to cover you up. Like, so already, like, I don't care if it's a white lie, it's still a lie. Like, if we want to debate pedantic and semantics with Metatron, like, you're a liar. Like, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. that is the definition of a lie. It doesn't matter whether you think it's a white lie or whatever. It's the definition of a lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. There we go.
We can get a little bit of a hint as to what this has to do with the teaching curricula in the United States. We read, Florida's new history standard, a blow to our students and nation. New Florida standards teach that black people benefited from slavery. And CBC News says Florida's new black history curriculum says slaves developed skills that could be used. So of course we can see that this not only has to do specifically with slavery, it has to do with the idea of...
I don't know if it's because he was reading too quick, but he misread that title. And that just felt very lazy. It literally says, like, you know, skills they could use for their own benefits, and he reads it out loud instead, oh, skills that they could use. Like, I don't know, maybe it's nitpicky, and I'm definitely, speculating, but I just thought that was lazy. I'm pretty sure he never read those articles, he just showed the screenshots.
Okay, but what sort of skills did slaves actually develop in the US specifically? And then it has to do with African American history. Now, I understand that some people will say, well, yeah, but even in history there is politics, and that's absolutely true. But one thing is discussing politics or political science from a historical standpoint, understanding exactly where things land with the aid of documented evidence, and the other thing is to allow propaganda to shape the way we present information specifically to a younger audience. I think the only person that can come to this with a more of an unbiased position is those who sort of set aside the political preferences and say, okay, but in this specific case, we are talking about slavery. It's a precise topic.
Well, that's certainly interesting. We're just not gonna talk about the politics, even though the articles he cited clearly point to the language of the guide and the political implications of such a thing.
But I'm gonna stop it here. Can you imagine, chap? I take it we all heard what Metatron said and what Terry Duke is saying about that. But can you imagine? I'm just gonna add my extra layer now. Can you imagine, chap, if the left or if the Democrats were in charge in a state and they were saying, we're going to stop history how it's being taught, and we're going to teach it a certain way. I don't know, say we're going to teach that ancient Greece was a gay haven, transsexual haven, and every other person was mixed this. Can you imagine, like, Metatron saying, I'm going to do a video about this topic, and I'm going to come at... This is ridiculous.
Yeah, you don't even have to go with a hypothetical on that one. Well, maybe with Metatron you would have to, but like the right absolutely lost their minds when I think it was Project 1619 that was introduced in the States. It wasn't even like a proper curriculum or anything. It was something in like one of the big New York Times, I think. It was a project that was specifically looking at the United States history from the perspective of slavery. Like 1619, that's when the first slaves were imported. Conservatives absolutely lost their minds over this one, and it's literally just, you know, like trying to bring that perspective into the history, you know. So it's like, of course it's already happened. Every time there's something, like they call it woke, they freak out. It always happens. So this comes from the right, and now it's like, oh well, you know, like let's strip it of everything else and just focus on topic. You know, that's
the whole point of it is that it comes from a political. That's the only reason we're even talking about it.
You can't strip the history from like the political implications of it, and if you're trying to enforce your narrative on it, you're being political. Like there's no way about it.
Especially when the people who are enforcing the rules are telling you it's because of political reasons. It's because we don't want history. So how does Metatron sit there and say, well, I don't know if this is political? What are we dealing with? Who is this guy?
We know why, but I will get there. The whole point of me bringing up this example was that politics are getting into schools and pointing out how dangerous that is and how this should be what he covers on his channel because of it. But if he's going to avoid talking about the politics, then what even is the point? Instead, he wants to talk about it from the perspective of a teacher that ignores all the politics.
What sort of history is being taught in schools is absolutely something that I find a very strong item of interest of mine, not only because I'm a former school teacher and I used to teach, I did that for over a decade, so that's definitely something that I think I can speak not from the perspective of politicians that know absolutely nothing when it comes to how you teach history at school, but from the perspective of someone who has spent over a decade doing the very thing.
But that's the thing though, the curriculum is being influenced by politicians, not the teachers. So if Metatron wants to talk about it from the perspective of a teacher, it starts with putting politicians back in their place and calling out their actions when it gets in the way of teaching.
Because in this case, the accusation is that the right wing, or the American right, is trying to push a propagandized message to the students, trying to teach things that, according to Harris as a speaker, is incorrect. But then again, propaganda is pushed also from far left-wing positions too.
This is such a dishonest framing. Yes, the accusation is that the right is trying to push propaganda, and Metatron knows this. He read the articles. The fact that he can't even present it properly should be the first sign of a grift. Oh, I guess the accusation is that the right is doing propaganda, but what about the left? They also do propaganda, so like, the right gets accused here, but like, the left too, so... My god, what a weasel.
I just want to say that's excellent. That's excellent. This is, I mean, there's no need, I mean, to play with kid gloves when you're dealing with somebody like this. He's almost at 1 million subscribers. Now, I don't care about that. More power to him. But if you're going to, if you're going to attack this man on the basis that what he's doing is dangerous, then you better do it properly. You better dissect him properly, and that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing somebody properly dissect this guy, and it doesn't actually take much. It doesn't actually take much to do it. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I wonder how he sleeps at night. I really wonder how he sleeps at night doing this stuff. And I say that as somebody who I go on about this every other live I do. I'm a Christian, okay? I'm a born again believer, and in this community that it didn't used to be, but in this community of recent times, because a lot of people want to go back to African spirituality, which I understand where they're coming from on that, but it's becoming more and more controversial to say that within the black space. It didn't used to be, but in any case, I'm dealing with somebody who ostensibly I should actually agree with, because Metatron came out, I think he would class himself as evangelical, and I would class myself,
I think
if
he's
I had to, as evangelical. Right. But certain
Roman
evangelical
Catholic, like the OG, like Italian Catholicism, you know.
He came out with a video not long ago talking about his deep Christianity and whatnot. But everything that we're seeing are the hallmarks of a patently dishonest person. So when I watched that video months and months ago, I felt particularly affronted that here's a guy who's adding to his right wing grift an even worse sort of layer. He's now putting in religion. He's coming at a sincere section of his audience and saying, trust me, because I'm also a deeply Christian person. And I didn't fall for it for 1 second, because the scriptures will tell you, by their deeds you shall know them. So I don't care. It's a pattern that you'll see with this guy. He says one thing, but every other thing he does, the pattern of every other thing he does, I would trust the crack addict over I trust this guy. I'll say that, and I would trust the pimp before I trust Metatron, for all his Catholicism. Anyway, whatever. Let's go.
But in this specific case, we are talking about slavery. It's a precise topic. Did slaves actually earn skills? And that is really the question we should ask.
And that's about it. From here on out, Metatron is just switching the topic completely. The premise isn't whether or not slaves earned skills, it's whether they benefited from slavery by being forced to learn certain skills. This is what the entire conversation is about. And again, by purposefully reframing the question, Metatron is trying to make it out as if the topic is neutral, purely academic. And if anyone is being critical, then surely it comes from the left. That said, Metatron has delved pretty deep into the topic, at least according to him.
Now,
Right, go on.
Yeah, I just want to say, because, you know, like, you're talking about, like, how, you know, like, you have your own personal interest in African history, talking about, like, your own religion, like, you're also coming at this with your own bias, we could say, but you're honest about it, is the point. I'm a leftist. I come at this from the left. I don't think that in itself is a bad thing. If people could say that, like, the reason I am wrong or incorrect with an argument is precisely because I approached it with, like, a left-wing lens, and that's what led me to be wrong, then fine, you know, totally fair. But the thing about him is that, again, like, by trying to remove the politics, he's actually showing what his politics are at the same time. And the other thing, and this is really what I want to talk about here, someone brought that up to me in my comments a couple of days ago. Like, there's this term I used for Metatron in my first essay. I called him a truth crusader. Like, he's got like this persona, you know, like, I stand for the truth, I fight against the misinformation and stuff like that. He's got this badass thumbnail, you know, looking like this, like, did slaves learn skills? And it's like, okay, today we're talking about slavery, strap on snowflakes. And then it's like, did they learn skills? Is that like a really hot topic? Is that really like so brave, man? So brave. You have such hot takes. You're such a crusader. You are such a badass. Like, this is all you're talking about. This is so milquetoast. You know, there's nothing about it. You ask anybody, did slaves learn skills? Yes. Who cares? That's not the point.
But let's even go into that. I don't know if he's actually posited the question. I want to wait for him to posit the question formally, and then I'll tell you what I think about that question itself. Thanks, bro.
One of the things that I try to do in order to try and come prepared to this discussion is that I actually looked at this bill that oftentimes is referred or mentioned during these articles that talk about this situation, and I read the entire thing.
Go on,
I just want to say, like, yeah, I read the entire thing. Like, full disclosure, I didn't. I opened the document and I did Control F to search for keywords, and I typed benefits, and I landed right on it. You know, that's all I looked at, because all the articles that they were talking about that one line, you know, and that's what I said, you know, even in the video. Like, as far as I know, that's the only issue in the 200-page documents. But like, this idea, okay, you read the entire thing for this video, and you make 2 videos a day, and you can't even read the title of another article properly, but somehow you read this entire thing. I doubt it. Like, I strongly doubt it. I can't prove it in a court of law, but I doubt it.
Of course. And even in courts of law, is that nothing's ever proved it conclusively. The only thing, what's proved in a court of law, at least in the UK, is beyond what you can prove beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
So that's really what it comes down to. So you don't even have to prove it. But again, is it reasonable to believe that he read a 200 page document off of and when it comes down to actually framing the document in the terms of its own words and in the terms of its own context, that he refuses to do that? Or at least, like you said, you pointed out how lazily he read that headline.
Mm-hmm.
Is it probable, is it likely that somebody that lazy, and he's done this before, he's done this with other video, even just his thumbnail alone is lazy, just the fact that he chose a rusty ship. it couldn't find a galleon, like from the
it looks like a rusty tanker. Like, I don't know what that was like.
Yeah, but here's this guy will have read a 200-page document. And you also showed how you did a fantastic job on proving that he didn't watch the video that he claimed to be. He didn't watch a movie that he claimed to be reviewing in good faith. The Woman King. He claimed to do this takedown of that movie. So much so, you dissected the fact that he didn't watch that movie. So much so that he had to do a response to it and claim that, oh, I didn't watch it. I have a team that watches this bit and that bit and this bit and that bit. That's a far cry from when you said you watched the movie. You know, that's not
well, that's the thing. He never actively said he watched it, but it would be fair to assume, if he's making a video on it, that he did. You know, you trust him as a guy who enjoys history, who does all that stuff. Like, it's a lie by omission is what it is. It's
well, and also the fact that he had said he would watch. No, you played a clip from a previous video to that where he said, if Hollywood produced a movie like this, like The Woman King, I will watch that movie. So you didn't even have the decency to watch the movie. Mm-hmm. You come on to review it, and the assumption by everybody is that you're reviewing a film. Who reviews a film they haven't seen in its entirety?
And now it begs the question: did he really read the entire bill, the 200-page, or did some people of his team read this part and this part and this part? Like,
yeah.
I don't think either happened.
Exactly.
But the fact, like you said, like, everything is so lazy that, like, how can I take that one part seriously? you know?
Yeah, and the lie then would be not in whether or not he read this or that. The lie would be in the facade he presents, that he's this
Yes.
meticulous historian.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
a meticulous historian. So that's where the lie is. You're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a knee-jerk reactionary on the internet. That's all you are. You're not a historian of any real sort. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
um, this thing about whether the slaves, because I think I might have missed the part where he actually frames it for me. I want to say this, guys. This is more insidious than you might actually we might we might understand. For Metatron, and Duke It Out has said what he said about this, and I understand why he said it like that. But I had to stop myself and think deeper, because otherwise I would have let it rest on, yeah, slaves learn skills. Yeah, that's not the point. But actually, that's more insidious. What he's done is he's skipped the original umbrella question, which is, can you say that slavery was a benefit? Because that's what this bill or this direction from the state of Florida wants teachers. That's the impetus behind it. What's driving it is the idea that, oh, we can't let it be known that slavery was just an evil, and leave it at that, because, well, the side that likes to pretend they're not snowflakes, ironically, they're melting they're melting down at the thought of people actually seeing America in a bad light in any way. So they're scrambling now to present a bill that will direct people, or a regulation that will direct teachers to teach history a certain way favorable to Americans. And in doing that, they're saying you must teach that, slavery, there was a benefit to slaves. Now, if you skip that question, that very premise, to go on to, did slaves learn skills, that by implication. Now, Metatron does a thing he does all the time. Okay, he'll say one thing out of his mouth, but in reality, his actions are the opposite. Now, he goes on, I believe, in this video to later on say, of course, slavery is not a benefit. But if you start and you say, the question I want to look at is, I want to make this purely historical. Did slaves actually learn skills? Well, off the bat, yes, it's clear they did. By doing that, you are okaying the initial premise, because the initial premise is going on to talk about slaves learning skills in order to buttress its main point, that this was a benefit. So
Yeah.
if you say, I'm not going to talk about that, I just want to, but that by implication you are agreeing with the premise of the paper. So that's more insidious than we might actually want to. I'll give you an analogy. Who says, right, let's look at it this way. I'm not going to say the words because YouTube's going to get funny. Who says this person, this lady was, forced, we'll say graped.
Yeah, great.
Grape. This lady was graped, and, well, but let's look at the full picture now. Did her child, which she conceived through that heinous act, did he go on to achieve great things? Let's say the child that she had, that she kept, okay, went on to be LeBron James or whatever. And in appraising the situation, somebody says, well, let's look strictly at the fact. Did she gain a benefit from having conceiving LeBron James from that act of grape? Let's just look at that. Strictly speak, who does that? Who wouldn't say in the room, what the flip are you talking about? What is your aim in looking at that fact? Women have babies. That's what women do. So it's neither here nor there that her child went on to be LeBron James. Her child could have went on to be LeBron James either way. Whether or not she was graped, her child that she had in a consensual loving relationship could have gone on to be LeBron James anyway. It's not, we don't appraise that fact we don't appraise the grape in the light of the fact that the child went on to be LeBron James. But even having said that, it's a false premise. In fact, I did a video, I've done 2 videos now about looking into enslaved peoples, and one of the videos has shown how the colonialists, the American settlers, actually went to the west coast of Africa to search out slaves, or search out captives who were adept in rice growing, because
Mhm.
West Africans were growing their own indigenous brand of rice.
Yeah.
They've been growing for thousands of years. They've been doing that, and so the American settlers would go seeking out slaves with that skill, or people captives with that skill. Okay, and that skill literally fed the South. It fed the South for about 100 years before it wasn't needed anymore. Again, iron making. A lot of the things that people don't know is that Africa had its own iron industry for millennia before anybody came. It might not have been on this industrial scale, but for its own purposes, within its own for its own purposes, it's had its own iron smelting and iron industry. Again, this was something that the settlers of the Americas were looked for when they were seeking out captive and slave captives. So a lot of these quote unquote skills that slaves learned, actually, no, the opposite. When you look deep into it, the opposite is actually true. In fact, they were sought out for their skills.
Yeah,
So
I just wanna add to that, because I go on to quote a teacher, and there's a part that I left out of what he says, but that's exactly what he says. Jorge Botelho, I think, he talks about, like, he says, like, the truth is that, like, they did not benefit from slavery. But then if you go in the article, he proceeds to follow it up by saying the truth is that they actually sought skilled laborers, people who knew what they were doing, people who were specialized in certain things, and those would be prized slaves. That's so what you're saying is exactly what that teacher says, and that means that teacher, that's what he was teaching in his class, and what he was being told by the government is actually what you should say is that it benefited the slaves. Which, for the record, I just want to say, like, it seems to me that the only type of people who would say, the slaves benefited from slavery are the same people who would follow it up or precede it by saying, well, black people living in mud huts, going nowhere in Africa, actually, it was good for them to come to America, because even though they were slaves, well, then they got liberated and now they live in a better place in Africa, And one person that actually said that is General Lee, who was one of the leaders of the Confederacy. And there are still people today who say that, and that line of argumentation is literally just a follow-up. It goes from, well, now today, 300 years later, they're better off, ignore longer prison sentences and stuff like that. But it was a good thing that they came, they benefited from the slavery, and they're better off now than when they were in Africa. It's like, it's the same thing all over,
It is exactly the same thing. And you said something earlier, I wrote it down. You said he never brings what he says to its natural conclusion. That the natural conclusion of him saying, well, they learned skills, is that you're saying that, you're agreeing then that, slavery was great, they benefited. That's the natural conclusion of saying, well, slaves learned skills. Who again, to use another analogy, who looks at the situation of the Jews and says, well, factually speaking, let's look at this. I mean, they did benefit from the events of 1939 to 1945, because look, they got their own country. Let's just establish that. I'm Kanye now doing the thing with Taylor Swift and Beyonce. I'm just gonna say Beyonce had the best record. Who does that? Who says I'm just gonna say these Jews, you see, they did benefit from. Who does that? Nobody says that. Nobody talks like that.
And the thing is, like, just to kick that point down further than we already have. Like, I had someone, like, in my comments, I just found it again, saying, imagine it's pretty close. Imagine standing accused of human trafficking, and in your defense, you say that the girls you trafficked learned skills, and instead of being disgusted, people started arguing, well, he does have a point. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Much better. Exactly. Who does that? Anyway, I'm just gonna hit play again.
Yeah, go.
Learned skills by being slaves? Then the answer to that is absolutely yes. With that being said, it is also important to underline that the slavery is indeed something that we as a society condemn, and of course the simple fact that a slave may have learned skills due to the fact that he was performing work or labor, even though he wasn't paid for it, doesn't justify nor makes it beneficial to have become a slave. Should we deny the fact that these people became really good at doing these things and absolutely learned a skill, no, I don't think we should deny it. But what we should do is to contextualize it correctly.
And this is the only credit I can give Metatron. He does not believe slaves learning skills should be seen as a benefit of slavery, let alone a benefit to the slaves. Amazing. The problem though is that he could not even say this without making up a strawman. No one is suggesting that we should outright deny the fact that slaves learned skills. It's certainly not a point made by anyone anywhere I looked. That's not what the conversation is. It's about whether slaves benefited from slavery by learning skills. Metatron can disagree with the premise all he wants, but if he's purposefully ignoring the political implications, then what even is the point of this video? We're already halfway through, and by dumbing down the topic, Metatron is not adding anything of value. He's just going off for a while about how slaves throughout history would have learned skills based on what they did, and arguing that it should not be controversial to state that fact. Which it isn't, because it's not what people are talking about. But he does, somehow, bring it back on track, just for a moment.
Which is why my position is the simple fact that you had a Greek slave in ancient Rome, and let's say that they were very educated, and then they were often forced to teach the kids of the wealthy Roman families. They learned skills and become excellent teachers as a result. Absolutely, I'm not going to hide that, and saying that is not racist, unless...
Yeah, shout out to London. I'm just gonna present that in the screen. It's worth reading out. Transatlantic State University. Got my 400 years degrees in skills. So just exactly.
See that's what it was all for. It paid off.
Yeah, exactly. All the beatings, all the grape and everything else. Yeah.
Yes, what you're trying to present is that, therefore being a slave wasn't so bad, and in fact, you see, if you weren't a slave, you wouldn't have learned that. If that's what's being presented, that's nonsense. The experience of a slave is dehumanizing and it's horrible, and I agree with that statement.
Well, you heard it, everyone. If the guide says what it says, and if a hypothetical teacher uses the information to downplay slavery, then that's bad. But is that what the guide effectively enforces on all teachers? Well, we can't confirm or deny that because we're not talking about politics on this channel, see? But hey, if an individual teacher says that of their own volition, well, in that specific case, Metatron opposes it. Well, that's nice, I guess.
But what I disagree with is
that
that doesn't mean that now, just because...
Yeah, and this is why, like, in spite of him saying that and him probably pointing out that he said that to defend himself, we're still beating down on it. Because it's like, what's the point of saying it if you can't acknowledge it when it's part of a broader systemic issue? You know, if you said, yeah, like, if like a bunch of cops like beat up Rodney King while he was on the ground, that's bad. But then if you can't call out systemic racism, what's the point? You're not saying anything of value. You're not making any brave statements. You're just saying, well, if that happens, then I'm against it. Okay, then call it out. That's what you're supposed to do. If you say on your channel that you fight for the historical truth that is under systemic extensive attack, then call it out when it happens. If the only time you can do that is when they have a Black Cleopatra on Netflix, you're a coward. He would probably say, oh, that's an ad hominem, you know, he's attacking me, therefore I will never respond ever. But the thing is, I'm just holding him to the standard that he claims to have. You say you're all about the historical truth, then do it. If not, I'm calling you out on it. Like,
if he does ever respond to you now, all I can really foresee is a sort of damage limitations operation. That's how cynical I am. All he would be responding to you for directly now would be, and I say that because I've seen him do it before, it's just a PR kind of system. And I say that knowing that you and I are small channels, especially compared to him. But I think this is a person with very, very thin skin anyway, because he's responded to others. He's responded to far lesser channels before, and without fearing that he would send his people to, his trolls to that channel to disturb the content creator or whatever. So he's done it's a ruse, this idea that he's ignoring you because he doesn't want to send his people your way. I've seen him respond to similar sized channels before in the past. So
and I mean, like, he literally says it in a comment that he left to me. He says the first reason was I don't want to overwhelm your channel, but he literally says it's not the main reason. The main reason is you called me a grifter. Like, that's it. I also think it's not very honest. I suspect that if You know, I would very much doubt that if Bad Empanada, like of all the things he said on Metatron, if the word he had used was grifter, there would have never been any response whatsoever. It's really just because I'm too small, he can pretend I don't exist. That's really it. I do want to say, and this is always like something that's a bit of I want to say a bit of paranoia on my side. It's that if he did, until he does respond, I have no real idea of how genuinely strong my arguments are because they haven't been tested. You know, I'm just making the videos and they end up in the void where some people find them and they sometimes it's his fans coming after me, sometimes other people who are disillusioned with his channel. But until he responds, I have no real way of knowing, like, does he actually have a counter argument to this? You know, am I completely like way off on something? I have no idea. So, but the fact that he goes out of his way to really ignore me like that, the fact that he this is the other video which I don't think we'll get through, but like the other video, like it's a complete response to me without ever mentioning me. So he has all the freedom to handle it on his own terms, to respond to it. He could even misframe the argument as much as he wants and then respond to those straw men, but like even then he embarrasses himself. So yeah, I think like this is a broader point that I'm making. Excuse me, I'm almost done. I think one of the only things, and I say this generally, I think the only thing at this point that's going to get Metatron to actually like really put his beliefs into practice is if he has like a live conversation the way you and I are right now. Because as long as he hides himself behind his scripts and his editing and releasing videos in his own time, he has full control of what he says and how he perceives everyone else. But if he's in a live conversation and he has to address the points as they are brought to him and you're holding him to that point, then he has no choice. And I think that's when the whole facade would crumble. That's my theory. But until he does that, he's gonna stick to his shtick. And I think the longer he sticks to that, the more likely he is never to actually debate anyone, whether that's me, you, or anyone else.
Well, I mean, if it's true that he is a grifter, grifters do not do anything that isn't profitable. So I don't think he's gonna look costs benefits analysis. He's not going to. I've noticed he does that. He responds to weaker arguments against him, and I think pattern. You can't possibly respond directly to your critiques of him because they're too. That's why I loved them. They're too clinical. They're too surgical. You know. So and backed up with proper research. Again, I'm not saying that to just butter you up, but that's a fact.
I appreciate
family.
it anyway.
If you've not actually seen his series of takedowns on Metatron, that's how you take down a grifter. That's how you take down his narrative. We don't even have to. This is why we don't even have to agree on the Afrocentrics thing, on Black history thing per se. It's the methodology that matters, you know. Anyway, let's go.
Yeah. Slavery is horrible. We need to hide facts. They absolutely learned those skills. And I'm not going to hide that and say, oh, no, they didn't. No, they didn't because slavery is horrible. That's quite pathetic in my opinion.
Well, again, nobody is saying that. It's just a straw man to make it about the left, which, to be clear, Kamala Harris is not a leftist, okay? But even she did not argue that you can't talk about slaves learning skills. She's against the phrasing like everyone else.
And the way we should look at this from an educational standpoint is, how are the teachers teaching this? Are the teachers trying to justify slavery and say, oh, you know, it's overstated. In reality, Africans that were forcefully brought to America, you know, they didn't have it so bad. They were slaves, but you know, what was the alternative? Live in a mud hut? If that's the message, then that teacher should be fired because you shouldn't teach that to your kids.
Himself. He's doing it again, and it's infuriating. Right there, he sees the connection himself that I just made earlier. Maybe in my subconscious, I remembered he was saying that, and it kind of can't. I don't know, but he just made that same connection. It's the same rhetoric, but the fact that he can't tie that to the politicians, to the control of education by the state actually doing that, when that's what his channel is supposed to be all about. Honestly, this is one of the things I was thinking to myself when I was making this video, and it's that if he actually made a video like defending, you know, the way they're framing it, you know, I would completely disagree with him, but I would at least respect him for at least holding a position. but he's not. That's what's so frustrating about it. Like, you see the connection. Like,
And that's exactly what makes me conclude that this isn't stuff that's done, and you don't have to agree with this. Nobody has to agree with this, but those are the kind of signs that make me believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's not stupid. He knows what he's doing. And that's why I wonder, how can you sleep at night? What I mean, I want to say this before I forget, guys. He's almost got 1 million subscribers, as I said earlier. Another thing that you note is that despite following such trends, grifters, especially right-wing grifters, despite having so many followers and doing quite well on their grift, one of the things they quite readily do is cry victim and shout how the whole world is against them and how the whole world is suppressing them. I mean, I don't know how good this suppression is if you're coming close to 1 million subscribers, but it's just the pattern you notice. You notice that, and I say that to say this, guys. Don't let them. This is just to my general audience now. Don't buy this hype that, oh, how do I say it? Stay woke is what I'm gonna say. Stay woke, stay paranoid as anything. Stay paranoid, because it's contrary to the claims that we're being suppressed, the war's against us. Actually, it sells. Attacking our history. I don't know about all the other things they get up to, but attacking our history, it sells. It sells. There's attacking, there's something about it. There's something about putting those blacks back in their place that really gets people. There's a video on YouTube right now, and I don't know the channel's regular audience, normal audience. I think I checked very cursorily a while back, but it's just general history. But one of their most successful videos is, if it's not done 3 million views now, I think last I checked it was 2 million, is how Africans had a hand in slavery. Now, I see that every now and then, suggested to me. I don't click on it because it's just gonna annoy me. But I think to myself, have you ever seen a video on how, because it did happen for inexplicably there were Jewish people that had a hand in the events of 1939 to 1945 as well. They were there working in tandem with the Führer there. Now, I don't know why that is, but that's a fact of history. But who looks at that and says, and makes a video of how, let's appraise what was done to the Jews. They had a hand in it too. There were also Jews in the Nazi party.
But I understand what you're saying. Basically, there's always people who work against their own self-interest, and that's...
Thank you.
Yeah, because we're talking, for example, because you're talking about black people who participated in slavery. Well, that's what the Agoge were all about. The kingdom of Dahomey were slavers. We know that. But we also know that they had a customer base strongly encouraging, what they were doing, enabling it pretty massively,
Yeah.
So it's like, it's ridiculous to make all the focus about that when it's it's much broader. You're only doing it for the rage bait, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna hit play again.
Metatron clearly understands how this language could be used, but is categorically refusing to see it in its proper context. He says it again. If an individual teacher frames slavery like this, then they should get fired. But my guy, it's not some random hypothetical teacher saying this. It's the teaching guide for the entire state of Florida. And the guide is a direct result from the laws pushed by conservatives in that state. And don't take it from me. Take it from Florida teacher Jorge Botello, who was interviewed in one of the articles that Metatron cited.
Yeah, this is the quote you were talking about, the teacher who earlier,
Yeah, I don't think I read it out loud, but it's right there. I actually left it in. But he says, the real story is that people were brought over by force because of their skill sets. Like, he says it, and then he follows it up. So it's true, yeah. That were passed in these landmark court cases. Of course, one of them being the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. That's the short version. From this, I have to explain slavery. And I, in good conscience, cannot say or think it's ethically correct to say, well, African Americans did benefit from slavery. As a person who studied African American history, and I studied the African American experience in high school earlier in my career, I know they didn't benefit from slavery. So by suggesting that teachers seeing slaves benefited from slavery should be fired, while ignoring the guide Metatron claimed to read, he's suggesting all teachers who follow the guide should be fired, and is never calling out the politicians responsible. So at this point, it would be pretty important to make that distinction. Are we gonna fight against individual teachers that play down slavery, or are we going to go after the system that is forcing a political agenda on children?
But it would be also nonsense, obviously, to try and use this as a justification to say, you see, slavery wasn't so bad. But is that what this board of educators is trying to do?
Oh my god. Is he getting back to it? Will he finally attack the negationism actively coming from the right? Are we finally getting this?
But is that what this board of educators is trying to do? That's where I reach the limits of this discussion. I don't know, because I'm not that deep within American politics.
My dude, you said that you read the entire 216-page document. You also read those articles. How deeper do you need to go before you reach the obvious conclusion?
So that's the part that I'm asking you. What do you think about this whole situation? What was the reason behind this bill? What were they trying to do with these specific ideas? And what are your opinions on the remarks coming from both sides, Harris and DeSantis?
Well, there we have it. Metatron, not political, will call out anyone regardless of their political leanings, but he couldn't address the worst example of historical negationism he ever covered without being an absolute coward. His defense throughout the video, and basically every single time the hypocrisy comes up, is the same. He did not make that obvious conclusion, which will lead him to criticize the right, because at the end of the day, he doesn't want to get political, so that's that. And so, that's the reason he immediately refused to address this controversy in its full context, and that was the reason until now that he had never dared to address an example of real systemic attacks on history. In that sense, it's normal that he would not cross that line, but the thing is, Metatron has crossed that line many times. It's not been consistent at all, and it really just comes down to what side of the political aisle he happens to be talking about. And what this video did really is finally give me a concrete example of Metatron covering something coming from the right that I can compare side to side with a video attacking the left. And I use the term very broadly here, don't get me wrong, but it is a near identical situation, so that's exactly what we're going to do now. And for that, I'm bringing another video made by Metatron less than 2 months ago that I already covered previously. This Canadian university...
Alright, before we go on to this, I don't know what he's talking about there, but even in his mealy-mouthed defense there, he kind of plays himself because he says without connecting it to history. Well, that's exactly what we're saying. It would be a complete farce. Your channel's already a farce, but it would be a complete farce if you just spoke about politics. But what we're saying is, yes, obviously you have history in there, but you have it for the purpose, really, at this stage, of pushing a political agenda. Now, that's what we're saying. So we're not saying you don't talk about history at all, but we are saying what you're saying, which is that, yeah, it's connected to history, but it's there. It's your politics drives. I mean, you don't even have to argue that. You could just go on the guy's channel. It's like it's moral panic sort of
slop.
Yeah, slop constantly.
And that's what I was also saying earlier. It's that since I made this video that we're watching, I feel like the mask has come off gradually, and he's not even trying to maintain it anymore. He's just doing whatever he wants, and, you know, he's not really addressing the contradiction to previous content. He's just going with it. That video we're about to go over, I think you did go over it in the video of the last stream. It's my video Metatron Can't Read that I had actually covered. Is out of its mind. In this video, Metatron is making fun of a Canadian university for having a section on race and terminology on their website, where they essentially propose different words for different things, which sometimes comes off a bit silly, like suggesting that instead of the word slave, the term enslaved is preferable. And this is how Metatron presents the topic.
I was reading what the directions are when it comes to having to write something for the university. So you go to this university, and then what do you know? You got, at one point, you have to write something, whether it be a composition, whether it be an essay. And of course there were some guidelines, but they were mostly grammar, but not if you are in Canada. There are guidelines on what words are deemed offensive by the university that you're not allowed to use on whatever you're so basically you want a degree from there, you cannot use these words that are deemed offensive. And then the acceptable alternative.
As a quick side note, I just want to make it clear, although I do expand upon it in the previous video, but Metatron here is completely wrong. This document is not part of school policy, it does not control the language of students, as it does not apply to the school curriculum whatsoever. But for the sake of this video and showing the double standards, I'm going to proceed nonetheless with Metatron's premise and see how he approaches it. So on one side, we have a list of words on the website of a Canadian university. On the other, we have a teaching guide from Florida that uses controversial language to describe slavery. So the Canadian university, according to Metatron, is forcing students to use specific terminology as part of writing essays or dissertations. But what about the teaching guide from Florida? Is it forcing teachers to phrase slavery in a specific way? Well, we can't talk about politics because we never do on this channel, so let's just assume that it's vague, that both the left and the right are overreacting, and let's instead stick to history and ask if slaves actually learned skills, something nobody was denying or even talking about. And speaking of history, this is the angle from which Metatron approaches the Florida teaching guide, and the only reason he's talking about it at all, apparently, because it involves the historical topic of slavery.
Although I'm not going to address the politics of this, I'd like to discuss the topic of slavery from the perspective of actual documented evidence and facts.
So what was the historical context that warranted the video on the Canadian university?
So, not too long ago, I was browsing the internet, as I usually do, and then I ran into the website, the official website of the University of Waterloo in Canada.
Oh, there wasn't any. He was just presumably browsing the web, saw this of all things, and made a video about it. I guess history isn't needed at all to make a video then, as he told me in the comments.
All of my content, which has been accused of being politically driven, was always connected to history. Without a historical tether, I don't talk about it.
So one topic is not historical, but he talks about it anyway, and the other is political, but he tries to ignore that to make it historical instead. Now, in the video with the Florida School Board, he stops himself from reaching a political conclusion because that's just not what he does on his channel. But what about the Canadian University video? If it's not about history, what's the message of the video? It can't possibly be political, right? Like talking about those things that have nothing to do with history, like freedom of speech or political propaganda?
You know why this drives me nuts? Is because university, academia, are supposed to be neutral. And they're supposed to be neutral because they're supposed to show you facts and be logical, right? This is political propaganda. And they are being forced to use language that this specific party considers appropriate. This is highly problematic. The moment language is censored and you are told what you're supposed to write, even if you don't think it.
But this was the point of the last... This was the exact point. Coming from a state now, from a legislative body now, and you refused, you did the most weasel thing ever, and you said, well, audience, what do you think?
Yeah. And I just want to make it clear again, we're just like accepting his premise, but even that is false. The guide in Florida was telling teachers to tell their students that slaves benefited from slavery. This guide is not applicable to the students at all. I go into it in my previous video, but the point is, like, even if you take this premise at face value, where you have a university forcing language on the students, you can't call one out, you can call this one out, but you're not comfortable calling out the other. I wonder why. Like, why? You know, that's the whole point. It's embarrassing. And that's why, like, I haven't been saying anything. I'm just letting myself cook on that one.
Oh my goodness.
You keep writing it and you end up saying what they want you to say. You're pushing their message whether you like it or not, which to me is unconstitutional. What they're trying to do is that they're trying to dictate what you're allowed to say and therefore possibly in their mind by extension what you're allowed to think. This is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous route. I know we laughed about it and it is funny, but apart from being funny, it's also dangerous because whenever you look at totalitarian regimes, it happened with the fascists in Italy, it happened with the Nazi party in Germany, and of course it happened with Stalin and the communists in Russia in the 1940s, that the government will use anything in their power, in this case academia, to suppress individual thought.
It is genuinely amazing to see Metatron unambiguously call something political propaganda, call it censorship, and forcing people to use a specific language, and even making comparisons with the fascists and the Nazis, and then stopping short of doing the exact same thing the moment that political propaganda comes from the right. So if it's woke terminology on the Canadian University's website, Metatron doesn't even need it to be about history. He'll gladly talk about it anyway and call it political propaganda at the first chance he gets, But if it's right-wing politicians putting pressure on the school system to enforce specific language on slavery, though, well, it's too political, so I can't get into that. But also, the left does a lot of attacks too, but if it's an attack from the right, well, I don't know, even though I read a whole bunch on it. So let me ask my audience what they think instead, so I don't come too harsh or biased. Again, this is not because Metatron's channel is not political. It is. And it doesn't matter how many times he says otherwise. The videos, the premises, what he claims to be fighting against, it's all by design political. I was using this video because they are so similar in context that the contrast in the way he speaks of the two topics is really obvious. But he's made a lot of those political videos before, talking about how British cartoons are misleading children because of a black Roman. That's political, by which I mean he's making it political.
And to those who say, but these are just cartoons, relax, bro. If you are familiar with history, specifically World War II, the powerful propaganda used by Germany between 1939 and 1945 specifically made use of propaganda cartoons. So yeah, I'll take them seriously.
Talking about homosexuality in ancient Greece would be one thing, but
Go on.
yeah, BBC cartoons for children. Well, the Nazis had them too, so I must stand firm. Like, and then like, again, like the persona, like, I'll take it seriously. Okay, slaves benefit from slavery in America. I don't know. Like, it's like the facade is embarrassing. It's so cringe. And the thing that really bothers me with it too is that, you have a thick skin until you don't, because it's like you're like, I'll take it seriously. And then someone calls you out, you're like, oh, well, now you're insulting me. I'm not going to talk to you. Do you have the armor on or not? Like, where's the shield wall? What's going on? It's stupid. It's just, and really just that one, it just makes me laugh every time I see it. Like, oh yeah, they had putting black little characters for the children to feel represented. Like, that's Nazism right there. My God.
Whereas a party in charge of educators of that state to present history in a specific way. A party also that has people affiliated to it who just happen to like doing the Nazi salute at rally.
Yeah.
That part. No. I don't know, guys. Like, what could be possibly going on here?
Even Metatron, in good moderate fashion, even defended the Elon Musk salute. He said, like, I don't think he was doing that.
You're joking.
No, he did, because he did it, and then there was this whole thing on like the Roman salute, and Metatron was like, is the Roman salute real? And he went into a video over that, and the topic itself was interesting, and basically he came to the conclusion that there's no such thing as a Roman salute, but he also comes to the conclusion that Elon Musk wasn't doing a Nazi salute either. So it's like, okay, so it's not a Roman salute because it's not historical, but it's not a Nazi salute either. What is he doing? Well, we can't really talk about that, I guess.
Have you ever seen Doctor Strangelove and How I Came to Love the Bomb? It's an old movie, but it's almost, apart from the fact that it's black and white, you would think it was made yesterday, and you would watch it and you would almost think it was made by the guy who did great director, the guy who did Space Odyssey 2000.
Kubrick?
Yes, Kubrick. Yes, yeah. Stanley Kubrick. Brilliant film, hilarious. It's a parody, but there's a character in that that's I'm giving a lot away now, but there's so much to the film. There's a character in that who's one of these Nazi scientists that was brought over by Operation Paperclip to America, and he's constantly suppressing his Nazi tendencies, and throughout it he's involuntarily going it's literally, that's exactly what Elon Musk was doing. That's exactly what happened at that rally. He's literally, his tendencies were coming out, and then you've got people like Metatron on here who would just do what they do in defense of that. It's incredible. It's like real life imitating art. Anyway, I'm gonna hit play. We're nearly at the end of this.
But doing so specifically from the perspective of debunking LGBT activists, that's political, and he's the one making it political.
This is the case, for instance, of this page, far from being the only one, which is clearly trying to use the framework of Greco-Roman civilization as a historical example of a gay social paradise. But it's far from being the professionally conducted comprehensive analysis that you would need to do that. This is biased, incompetent, shoddy work.
Accusing historical fiction of doing propaganda while citing PragerU pundits, that's political. Claiming that Netflix chose to make Cleopatra black instead of making... Are you familiar with PragerU?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
You ever heard of that video they did during the George Floyd protest about why the statue of George Lee should that General Lee should stay up? Have you ever seen that?
No, I've not seen it. No, go and tell me about it.
Number one reason, he crushed the slave uprising before the Civil War, and then he joined the Confederacy. And also, he happens to be his tomb happens to be near that of George Washington, so therefore his statue should stay up. It was pretty nuts.
Wow.
They deleted it very quickly.
Wow.
But it goes to show, yeah, PragerU, they're conservative and they're not shy about it. But there's also a big part that they keep the mask on, and sometimes it slips.
Yeah. So freedom for the founding fathers, but not freedom for the revolting slaves. Yeah,
Literally,
sure.
it's like, one of the great things he did, that slave abolitionist who took control of the armory in some town, he crushed all of them. Great. That's
Yeah.
You need a statue for that, definitely. And if it was about misrepresenting history, Metatron would not shy away from talking about where it is actually happening, while courageously exposing political propaganda on Netflix. The real issue for Metatron is skin color. If Metatron had his way, historical movies would always be, to an extent, segregated by skin color under the pretext of telling the historical truth. But then they would get a whole bunch of other things wrong, and those would not be seen as a big deal. And he might defend himself on the idea that he just wants black people to make historical movies in Africa, but as seen before, this is not genuine either. If they try, he'll trash the movies without even watching them. So I guess that just leaves us with one question. Is Metatron's rhetoric racist? And I would say yes it is. To be clear, it's not white supremacy racist, it's not Nazi racist, but it's racist nonetheless. Racism isn't a black and white issue, pun intended, it's a spectrum of different beliefs and ideas. You could genuinely want equality for all groups, but that would not stop you from holding beliefs that can end up excluding groups from certain things, like art. And in the end, if Metatron's history of double standards and hypocrisy isn't racism or signs of a right-wing bias, then I don't know what is. So where does that leave us? Well, at the end of me making videos on Metatron, hopefully.
It was too juicy. He pulled you back in. He definitely pulled you back in because he did another great expose of him after this. Yeah, but that's the thing. I just would hope that at some point later the algorithm picks up the exposés you've already done on him, because there doesn't need to be. There's not much need apart from the fact that it's fun. It's hella fun to just debunk this guy. There's not much else that can be said to an honest observer. If you're an honest observer coming across your content on this guy, you've made the case very, very clear. And again, like I said, that's why he won't respond to you.
Yeah, well, it's at this point, I don't think you're like in the left-wing sphere, but there is this much larger leftist political commentator that I like watching, Sam Cedar. He's pretty big on the American left. One of the things he did years ago is he went against another person who claimed to be a liberal but was always pushing right-wing talking points, called Dave Rubin. And one of the things Sam Cedar did is he just produced a crap ton of videos. And he said that he was going to do that on the show. I'm just going to produce so much content trashing Dave Rubin. It's just going to be trolling. It's going to be a running gag. But the point is, I'm going to push so many videos talking about Dave Rubin that when people look up Dave Rubin, they will find me defining who he is. I find that very entertaining myself. I like the idea that, okay, to me, it kind of works both ways. I like the idea, I would love to have a conversation with Metatron. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love it. I certainly wouldn't shy from it. But I also like the idea of being like this tiny boogeyman in the back that like he's avoiding at all costs because for some reason, he can't have the conversation. He can't say why. He can't define it, because then he's falling for the trap automatically. But I like this idea of being like the Sam Cedar to his Dave Rubin. I don't know if I'm gonna make more videos because, like I said, like once I had already said everything I had to say, and the next video that I ended up doing, that's because he made a response video that was like the excuse I needed. But realistically, I doubt that I will be making more like.
Bro, no. If anything comes up, because he keeps, I've said before in time past, I'm a bit of a hypocrite on this point. I will never make another Metatron video. Just put him aside. But recently, he did some things that made me want to do a response to him, or do just revisit him. So I felt like enough time had gone by for me to respond to bring him back up again as a topic. So as for you, bro, your stuff on him is very entertaining, is very entertaining, and very sort of very cerebral. It's not just a drive by, like I said, it's not just a drive by. It's very methodical, and for
Okay,
that
yeah.
reason, it's very entertaining. So please, if the inspiration strikes you, do it. I would love to watch it. In fact, I've noticed that it's actually quite popular on your small channel. That topic is popular. It actually brings up more of your views. So yeah, for you,
Well,
definitely,
it's because I'm talking
definitely.
about a much bigger YouTuber, so of course it does.
Right,
So
right, right, right. No, but it's definitely brilliant. And I would also say, guys, this is important because again, well, I'm not gonna lie, it's important because it's fun. Okay, that's the number one reason. But the number two reason is that it's important because there is somebody with that much reach and influence out there that's spreading misinformation, that's spreading lies, uh, and it's been taken seriously. And it okay, there's lots of people spreading lies out there, but they're spreading lies particularly about a history of, I don't know how much what percentage of the world black and African origin peoples are, but I mean that's an influential microphone to be talking on a very wide group of people. And again, it always seems to be in a negative sort of a light, debunking us and doing this and this and that. I'll end it on this. I'll end my thoughts on him on this. He does from time to time he'll visit the Moors. Now, one of the things that he said in his video was about how it's dangerous. It's dangerous the way sort of race swapping will happen in movies. But that very act in itself is dangerous. Calling that dangerous, or it heightens something that is very whimsical from Hollywood. It takes it to another level. You've got an audience that's already paranoid that Blackie's gonna get you. Blackie's gonna get you, and the blacks are conspiring to whitewash our history. And then you, as a person with almost 1 million subscribers, start using terms like this is dangerous. Okay, where was the danger when we were watching, when we people grew up watching people play black characters in blackface? Othello played in blackface by Laurence Olivier. Where was the danger when people were playing, or people were starring Elizabeth, what's her name now? I can't remember the actor, as Cleopatra, a white woman. I mean, okay, even if you don't agree with us that these people were by and large black or black Africans, they were certainly had more color than the people that have been playing them for the past 50, 60 years.
Yeah, for sure.
So where's been the danger? How it's not been dangerous then, but all of a sudden people are doing, tokenism in Hollywood, and they're putting black faces where there should be white faces, and all of a sudden this is dangerous. That in itself is dangerous. That in itself, doing that, what you're doing there, is a dog whistle. That's actually quite dangerous. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I mean, it's like to his defense, like I've seen him. I say to his defense, quote unquote, because like he has brought up examples of like like shameless whitewashing and blackface and
Right,
stuff like
right,
that.
right.
He has, though. Usually when he brings it up, it's before he spends 20 minutes complaining about blackwashing. So it's like it's the little disclaimer at the beginning to say like I acknowledge it before you call me anything. But then you see all the other stuff he does, and it's not really even at all. The thing about whitewashing is that thankfully, like it's not even remotely as insane as it used to be, although it still happens.
What I was gonna say. Okay, so let's put it this way. Let me ask you this: if he does content directly mentioning you, um obviously that would pull you back in, that would pull you back to saying,
Yeah.
making a response. But do you foresee him doing that, and do you think that if he did, it would be sort of, are you kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt now? Where are you? Do you think like he's gonna do something at some point, or you just think it's a lost cause?
I have no idea. Like I don't think like I
Yeah.
said, he had the opportunity
Mm.
to respond to me directly. He didn't. He went out of his way not to mention me by name. And, he can use whatever excuse he wants, whether that's, and even if they're sincere. Like, I believe him when he says, like, okay, he's got way too much of a small channel. It would look bad for me, a much bigger channel, to attack him. Even that, like, YouTuber etiquette, like, I understand it. But that's also why, like, there's other alternatives, too. Like, I literally told him multiple times, like, in private or in public, however you want. Like, I would like to have that conversation. Like, and he can, at this point, he can pick from multiple topics. You want to talk about the Woman King? You want to talk about your censorship on YouTube? You want to talk about the Florida curriculum? We could have that conversation privately, and you would never have to cover me on your channel. Like, I would be down to do that. In terms of like whether he's going to respond, I just don't think so. I think
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
very much looking at his channel right now in a business mindset, if you will. Like, he's like, okay, like now I'm doing the daily videos, I'm doing the live streams, I'm trying to stick to topics that are safe, that are easy, so like even the response videos, I know there's this other YouTuber recently that made a video on him and Shad and another guy, Freda. I don't know if you saw that.
No, no.
It's called Medievalists Are Weird, and it's a 1 hour video by a guy who does historical content where he went over Metatron's video on whether the Nazis are left or right wing, and he just quickly broke down like how bad the methodology is and how the whole video basically feels like Metatron trying to say I'm right wing but not like that. It's and he goes over it, and then someone from my audience showed me a clip of Metatron talking about that recently, saying that like, yeah, that YouTuber who made it, Freda, like he's on my radar. That's what Metatron said, and he said, oh, I'm gonna make a response, but I'm also thinking of going over like all of his channel. And to me that sounded like he's gonna try and find the odd thing that he said somewhere else to try and discredit him before attacking the points. Like, I don't know, but he said like, oh, it's gonna take me a couple of weeks to make that video, and it's like he's gonna respond because the video is huge right now. It's nearing 300,000 views. He has no choice. Like, it's right there. And the thing is, I think, I want to say that Metatron, like, may have had an interest at some point in, being corrected. I don't think that's it anymore. I think now he's very self-conscientious. I'm not sure. Self-conscious. Sorry. And, I think he's concerned about other YouTubers, attacking his character. That's what really drives him right now. And it's like, if someone questions his qualifications, then he's going to complain that, oh, you told me I have no qualifications. Here's my diploma. Like, and that's the level that he's working on, And as long as he stays on that level, it also allows him to keep up that truth crusader image, even as he's being debunked left and right. I'm obviously speculating a lot here. All I can say for myself is, Metatron, you want to have a conversation, we can have it in private. You want a moderator, you want me to pinky swear that I will not insult you directly in that conversation, I'll do it. I have no problem. Because the thing is, like I said earlier, if I'm wrong and you have counter arguments that I should really consider, tell me. I'm down. I'll do it. Of course, I'm a leftist and I approach it from a left-wing position, but like I said earlier, if you can prove that my left-wing bias is leading me to make wrong assessments, then sure, I'd like to hear it.
And that's the thing that I find refreshing about you. I always say, I realized this a long time ago. I used to say it as well. I've got no bias in this. I've got no bias. But then I stopped and I decided to be honest and say, look, that's clearly, there's something wrong about that. And I I did it when it came to politics. I think it was years when I was just coming out of university. I had to realize, no, stop saying that. You do have a bias. But you know what? That's okay. Because if everybody's honest, everybody has some kind of a bias.
Yeah.
Everybody has some kind of a bias on, even on topics that don't concern us. That we wouldn't ordinarily think, oh, it's a big deal or I have any interest. You made a comment earlier at the start of this live, and it was so cool that you said that, because you're one of the very few people who've admitted something like this. You said your girlfriend said something about the French language, and you kind of took it a certain kind of way until you thought, oh my goodness, I'm being defensive where I don't Like, why am I being defensive? It's because it's coming. It's it's touching something that's
Yeah,
personal, and we all do that. We all
we
do
do.
that, and to pretend it's a sign of maturity to realize, look, up front, and to disclose that up front. Here's my bias. However, I don't think my bias is leading me to make, like you said, a wrong conclusion, because
Hmm.
here's my methodology, blah blah blah. But my alarm bells go off completely haywire when somebody comes at me with, I'm just looking at this from a dispassionate. I'm a completely neutral observer. No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. No, 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 no. Let's not
Hmm.
do that. Thank you very much. I hope I'm saying your name properly. Idzihar Mohammed, $5 super chat says, congratulations on making 21K followers. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I'm very, I'd be lying if I said I don't look at that number every day and think, oh, that's pretty cool. But yeah, thank you for that. Guys, speaking of which, go to Duke It Out YT. Well, that's his tag, but Duke
Yeah.
It Out. It might be hard to find when you type it into YouTube search engine
Hmm.
because it's still a small channel. But if you type Duke It Out and Metatron, you will
Yeah.
find it. You will find it, and make sure you sub to that channel. Lots of good stuff coming from that channel. I've kind of run through all the questions and things I wanted to ask you specifically about. But let me say, when you what direction do you see your channel going in now? What are you going to be doing more of in the future?
I'm gonna ask you to hold that thought because I gotta get him ready. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay? Yeah. Thank you.
So guys, I think he's a pretty cool guy. I really think he's a pretty cool guy. London MC says we'll be subbing. We will be subbing. I hope you guys will. I think he just his general content alone is pretty yeah, it's pretty cool. I think he's an honest guy. And look, fam, the whole thing about whether someone's like an Afrocentrist or not, or whether he comes at it from our perspective or not, I don't, again, like I said, I don't care about that. We have skin in the game. It's naturally us that's gonna actually have an incentive to dig into the lies about us that's been written about us. So when I got in touch with Duke It Out, the brother Duke It Out, I wasn't surprised. In fact, I found it refreshing that he said to me, I kind of don't agree with everything about Afrocentrism. So is it gonna be like, do I have to sign on to everything that you guys say? And I said, no, no, that's cool. Because you gotta be mature about it. I mean, some of us think everyone from that background, them folk, they're not to be trusted. But I don't approach this like that. Again, some of best bits of information that I come across in my research for the different topics on the channel come from white folk, come from uh, people from that background. So am I gonna say that it's just immature? Basically, is what I'm saying, to look at life in that perspective and say, well, they have to agree 100%, otherwise, they're the enemy. And you guys get what I'm trying to get at, right? Let me add him back to screen, and he's gonna give me an answer.
So you were asking me where I see the direction of my channel going?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, the thing is, like I said, I still do. I watch a lot of political content, especially, from a left wing perspective, and I'm definitely interested. Like I've been the kind of guy who argues a lot in comment sections, which I enjoyed. Making those Metatron videos, and then his fans come in and I argue with them in the comments. Like that was always me, and I like the idea of having my own platform where I get to, have the conversations I want to have. With that, one of the things that I want as a YouTuber is to come up with, original content, something interesting, something new to say. And unfortunately, that's where I've completely blocked. Like, if you look at my channel right now, I started a series last year on Conservapedia, which is like Wikipedia for conservative. It's completely unhinged. And I decided, I'm going to make fun of that. But I also find that a lot of my style of commentary doesn't come naturally to me. Getting my energy on camera, defining this, and then having to say something that's both funny and entertaining and interesting, that's where I start overthinking it a lot, and I try and come up with, like I said, interesting things to say. And I've made a few videos. I have a lot of I have a list of like ideas of things I'd want to talk about, and it varies wildly. I thought about doing response videos to other channels. I thought about doing random commentary. You know, sometimes there was a time online, for example, I was seeing a lot of tours of billionaire mansions. I wanted to make a video just making fun of those because they're completely insane and stupid. There's the Whatever podcast that they keep pushing their shorts onto my feed. It's this dating incel YouTube channel, and I started like having a private playlist where every time I see a stupid short, I put it in there, and then I was like, maybe I'll make a video making fun of it or something. I definitely like collaborating with other YouTubers. I mean, we're doing it right now. I enjoy this, but unfortunately, like it's very much still the sideshow. My main show is my gaming channel, where I have the audience where I'm monetizing right now, so I'm trying to really focus on that one. But I do enjoy from time to time taking a break from that, and then trying something new on the second channel. And right now, until something really kicks in, that's probably where the channel is, how the channel is going to stay for a while.
Yeah, well, guys, that's the thing as well. So Terry Duke is the main channel, and even though it's a gaming channel, I think from what I checked last time I checked out the channel, it's still quite an interesting channel in and of itself. So I would go and subscribe to that channel as well. Look, we've got to treat this guy the right way, because this has been wonderful. Anyway, this has been one of the best takedowns of a common enemy that I've ever seen. So yeah, and make sure you subscribe to Terry Duke and Duke It Out on YouTube as well.
Thanks,
bro.
guys. And thank you so much for having me on and doing all this support. I saw the boost in subscribers I had a week or two ago, and I was like, where the hell is this coming from? I have no idea. And then someone came in and said I came here from the Trill Black channel, so then I go look it up and I see the live stream. I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know?
Wow,
so yeah, thank
cool.
you.
That's so cool. I didn't even think that would have an effect. Okay, that's brilliant, man. So yeah, if you guys haven't subscribed yet, make sure you go over now to that subscribe account. And yeah, looking forward to seeing even better things coming out from Duke It Out and Terry Duke, the Terry Duke channel. So guys, I'm all out of questions for tonight. Look out, I got some more content coming out, but for tonight, that's it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's been lovely. It's been a kind of chilled live. I hope you don't mind that so much. But yeah, thank you guys. From Kush to Compton, like I always say, it's your boy Trill Black, featuring and in tandem with Duke It Out. So peace.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.